Ever since being relegated to Disney Plus for a few years, Pixar seemed to have a problem finding its footing again, going from box office bombs to billion-dollar successes to everything in between, as well as movies that ranged from decent to downright good, or even rather bad, Lightyear. They've certainly been all over the proverbial map, with a lot of pressure being put on their latest film, Elio, to try and hopefully bring them back to their former glory. But the question must be asked, was this really the kind of movie to do it? Does Elio really capture enough of the Pixar magic to be able to bring in audiences? And today, rather than talk about all the buzz surrounding Elio, I would instead just like to give my general thoughts on this movie and whether or not it can compare to Pixar's best work. And needless to say, there will be spoilers ahead. So if you would like to see this movie for yourself first and don't want the ending ruined, please come back to this video another day. I won't be giving out any other spoiler warnings here. And please also keep in mind that I am not a professional film critic, nor do I claim to be one. I'm simply an average guy with an extreme love of movies, throwing in my 2 cents on this topic, and am strictly an amateur when it comes to movie reviews. So if any of that for any reason doesn't appeal to you, please feel free to click off the video. Okay, so to cut right to the chase, is Elio a good movie, and especially a good Pixar movie? Yes, and yes, at least in my opinion. And what I particularly give it credit for is that it's the first Pixar movie in a long time that doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. As in, it felt for a while there that Pixar itself had forgotten what it meant to be Pixar, making some of their later efforts feel somewhat synthetic, as I've even discussed in a few other videos. But here, everything feels a lot more genuine, and like all of Pixar's trademark heartwarming and tear-jerking moments are incorporated a lot more organically into the narrative. Because when something emotional happens here, you really feel it. And there are a lot of emotional moments to be had. And not to mention, I know I get on Pixar's case a lot about how their narratives are too mature for children, but here I'd actually say they handled the fact that the movie is geared for kids a lot better. Like for example, Elio can't handle his parents' death because he feels they're the only people who loved and understood him, and how it not only causes him to push his aunt away, both because he feels he's holding her back and because he feels she doesn't want him, but is also what motivates him to want to get abducted by aliens so badly. Because in short, he feels that by running away from Earth, he can run away from the pain of his parents' death because of the reminders it brings him. But what makes this movie different from a lot of Pixar's other movies is that most of this isn't discussed overtly. Sure, Elio does talk about the pain of losing his parents, but most of what I just said is never spoken out loud and is there for people to find if they're looking for it. But if they aren't, it can still be enjoyed just as much without it, which is exactly what a kids movie should do, and what I've ironically argued Pixar hasn't done too often. But here, they frankly couldn't have done it any better, and I will give them credit for it. Especially because even the moral is ultimately geared towards children first and foremost, and is a rather good one to boot. Because at its core, Elio is saying that just because your parent or parental figure doesn't always have time for you, or seems upset that they gave stuff up for you, doesn't mean they don't love you. And that in actuality, such sacrifices are actually the measure of how much they do care. Because Elio's Aunt Olga, for example, may be extremely stressed, busy, and had to give up some of her more extreme ambitions, but when you look at her, she's probably the best person Elio could have asked for to take care of him, because unlike what you might expect from a movie of this nature, she never loses her patience with him unless he's really pushed it, which is pretty often, but the point still stands, doesn't hesitate to pull him out of camp the moment he's hurt by the other children, and even tells those in charge off for letting it happen, and even before she says it out loud, makes it clear that she'd rather have the real Elio with all of his troublemaking quirks than a clone that makes her life easier and devoid of stress. I mean, who wouldn't want to be raised by somebody like that? That's frankly everything you could ever ask for in a parental figure. Especially when she finally says to Elio, "All I want is you," making it clear that no matter what her dreams may have been, he'll always come first to her no matter what, and is not a burden, but a blessing. But at the same time, it's hard to fault Elio for being unable to realize this, because once again, he's an 11-year-old obviously taking the death of his parents really hard and feels guilty about holding his aunt back, causing him to project all of his insecurities onto her. And to be fair, she's not the best at handling all the stress that causes, but when you've got a demanding job and a depressed kid who won't open up to you, that's not really too surprising. Though I do just want to quickly add, it isn't lost on me that Pixar released this movie, which specifically tells children that those who take care of you will always love you, are willing to give up some of their dreams for you, and will never view you as a burden or something holding them back. The exact same summer, Disney released a live-action remake of a movie with a very similar message and proceeded to subvert the whole moral, with the director even saying that he wanted to show that sometimes people do get left behind, but you'll still be taken care of anyway. Which isn't a bad message in and of itself, don't get me wrong, but why on earth would they put that lesson into a Lilo and Stitch movie, where the whole point of the story is the opposite moral? Seriously, if you're a frequent watcher of my channel, you already know I have a massive beef with Disney's live-action remakes. But even that aside, Elio is a much better movie than the live-action version of Lilo and Stitch, if for the sole reason that it understands the true meaning of family way better. Really, it's like Disney doesn't have any self-awareness anymore. But if nothing else, at least it seems that Pixar really does still have most of their creativity and artistic integrity intact. Because Elio wasn't a movie overseen by executives looking for a surefire hit. This was a movie that was made with genuine heart and passion behind it, and it shows in the final product. Because among other things, Elio is really good at presenting the problems of the characters in ways children will understand. It doesn't dwell on how Olga feels about Elio's parents' deaths, and makes it clear right away that she deeply loves him, but that work and stress keep her from properly expressing it, as well as how Elio's unconventional coping mechanisms only make things worse for both of them. But then there's the other way the movie gets all of that across, which is with Glorden, who is honestly the exact opposite of Elio. Because unlike him, who believes he's a burden to his aunt and she just doesn't want to say it, Glorden has been told point blank by his father many times that he's a complete and total failure, and he not only manages to deal with it, but is the nicest creature you could ever meet. Seriously, for being the son of a temperamental warlord who sees laughter as torture, Glorden doesn't have a bad cell in his body. And as a result, it makes sense that Elio would quickly form a strong bond with him, because unlike children on Earth who are quick to judge him for being weird, he's accepted by Glorden the second he meets him, to the point that he quickly goes along with everything he says. And in the process, he ironically does exactly what his father wanted him to, which was conquer his enemies. Only Glorden did it with kindness and compassion, rather than through brute force and strength. And speaking of that, I was pretty sure from the second he was introduced that Grigon was going to reform by the end. And I was a little frustrated when I turned out to be right, I have to admit. Since, as I've said in many other videos, a traditional, pure evil villain would be nice to see from Disney or Pixar these days. But in this case, I'm more forgiving of it because his redemption is just done so well. Seriously, even if Glorden didn't emphasize just how much his father viewed him as a failure, it's still extremely easy to imagine him feeling nothing but frustration for his son because he's the complete opposite of him and everything he doesn't want to be. And yet, when Glorden's life is on the line, he doesn't hesitate to commit his species' ultimate dishonor by showing his true form to save his son. And I have to admit, that moment got to me in a way only Pixar could, but hadn't managed to in probably 5 years. Seriously, seeing Grigon remove his suit, knowing the cultural implications and acting not like an angry warlord, but simply a desperate father trying to save the son he'd previously expressed contempt for, is downright heart-wrenching. You'd never expect a man like him to be accepting of a son who's so weak in his eyes. Yet not only is he willing to do just that, but it's all but stated that he had already accepted that his son would never be who he wanted him to. Because you notice how quick he is to realize that the clone of Glorgon isn't really him because he started saying everything he wanted to hear? That right there implies that, just like Olga, Grigon would rather have his real son, who is everything he isn't, than an imitation of him that's his ideal son in every way. And in the process proves that while he may not be the best warlord, he's ultimately a good father when he finally learns to express his love properly, to the point that not even his followers see what he did as a dishonor despite what their culture says. As I said before, the moral about parents or parental figures loving their children, even when they don't express it the best, is done really well through both the characters of Elio and Glorden, and it's one that should be told to children at that. As well as that just because you feel like you don't fit in with others, that doesn't mean you're alone and will eventually find somebody who understands you, even if it's somebody that's seemingly the opposite of you in every way. Because even though Elio and Glorden couldn't look any more different, on the inside they're simply two lonely kids looking for a friend that'll understand them, and manage to find just that in each other, to the point that they're both quickly willing to risk everything for the other. Simply put, not only does this movie know exactly what it wants to say with its themes, but it executed them perfectly, while also being more suitable for children than a lot of other Pixar movies at the same time. But for other, more miscellaneous comments, the concept of the Communiverse was a pretty good one, with the aliens not only having good designs, but rather diverse and favorable personalities as well. And I also like how Bryce turns out to be the nice kid he initially appeared to be, and didn't become just a typical bully to Elio. As well as that the Elio clone never turns on Olga even after she finds out, because that could have easily gone into clone turns evil and goes rogue sci-fi horror territory. And Elio being once again offered his ambassadorship to the Communiverse and rejecting it was also done pretty well, since even if it was a given he was going to give it up by the time it's over, the movie does do a good enough job of showing how Elio's learned that if he's going to be a good ambassador, that Earth is his real home and that he must accept that. Though the setup for the sequel is a little obvious, but if it never gets one, it can still work as a standalone story, so that's only a minor issue. In the end, Elio may not be the best movie Pixar ever made, but, at least in my opinion, is more than worthy of their name and most definitely cleared the high precedents that they've set for themselves, and a lot more so than a lot of their other recent movies at that. It's a movie that knows exactly what it wants to be when it comes to the themes and lessons it wants to impart, and executes pretty much all of them very effectively. Again, the results may not be perfect, but they most definitely scream Pixar in the best ways possible. And I can honestly say that, at least for me, this is the type of movie that Pixar should take notes from going forward, focusing more on films that harken a bit more to their roots when it comes to how to deliver an emotional gut punch and getting their respective themes across while also being a bit more mindful that they're supposed to be made for children. Sure, it isn't likely that Pixar will take much away from Elio, especially if it bombs, but regardless of that, I can honestly say that this is probably the best Pixar movie I've personally seen in a long time. Okay, I think I've made my point with all of this. So now I'd like all of you to tell me, what did you think of Pixar's Elio? Do you think it's a great, effective, and emotionally fulfilling return to form for the company? Or do you believe it's simply an average kids movie that only further shows the decline of Pixar since their golden years? Whatever the case, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. Because as I already stressed many times throughout, you don't have to agree with anything I said or any opinions expressed in this video. You can feel absolutely any way you want to about Elio and what it means for Pixar's future, and if you happen to think I had it all wrong, that is totally fine, and I don't think any less of you if you do. And thank you all for watching. It is all very appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.